guys, it's been a minute since my last video. Welcome back. I'm feeling fresh, motivated, and ready to go. So, you're probably wondering what I'm going to build this time. Well, this is something that's quite close to my heart. It's one of my personal projects from a few years ago, up until probably last year, early last year, when I sold it in bits. And that is my 20 valve Renault Clio 182 project. Yes, I put an Audi TT engine in a Renault Clio, and it was rather fast, but it was also rather troublesome and stressful. But I didn't do YouTube then. I didn't film anything. I filmed little bits and bobs, did some, took loads of pictures of what I'd done. So now it's time to go back through there, because the guy I sold the car to bought everything bar the engine that was in there. And yeah, it's my task now to take the project back on and rebuild everything, put everything back together, get it running, get it mapped, and ready for him to go play race car. So stay tuned. So this, my friends, is Project Matilda. It doesn't quite look the same as when I owned her. This car was my pride and joy. It was a road car, track set up for the road, but she's been in storage for quite a while since I sold her, so she's looking a bit sorry for herself, but she's all stripped out. This had a full interior in there, with rear seats removed, and a boot carpet when it was in my ownership. That's a gearbox that's got to go back in. We're waiting on a new clutch setup to come and a new flywheel, because the replacement engine that was purchased by the customer has got a 6-speed clutch and flywheel on it, so that's not going to work, because we're going to be using an 02J 1.8 20 valve turbo Audi A3 gearbox, and that's the setup we ran. So this is the engine. It's forged. It's got pistons and rods. So the top end's all been rebuilt, so it's good for well over 300 horsepower. It's a turbo. It's a KO4 hybrid. There's another turbo, manifold. These are all bits. Most of it's my parts that I built for the conversion. Like there's an engine mount, inlet manifold, the custom pedal assembly, There's a turbo intake pipe. These are the drive shafts I made. This is a shifter assembly that I was running. I'm just changing the cables over because the old ones are a bit stiff, so we're replacing them. So yeah, got my work cut out. There's boxes and boxes of bits. I've already gone about wiring the car back up. All the loom and everything's back in. The exhaust's on. And yeah, you probably see something which is a bit funny there. That's the original Clio ECU. You're probably wondering, what the hell is that doing in there? Well, anybody that's done a conversion on these cars with a different engine or a different engine brand, the K20s and 20 valve turbo ones, they're not set up the same as this car. I didn't want to run Audi clocks. The CAN bus system on Renaults are really, really complex. Basically what I'm saying is, the CAN bus system on a Renault is a pain in the arse to get around. So I didn't want to run Audi clocks or a race dash. I wanted to have my Renault clocks working, and anybody that's done a conversion in one of these cars know that's nigh on impossible unless you do what I did with this car, and this is what sets this build apart from the others. I know plenty of people have done this conversion before. Most of them are running race dashes or Audi clocks. If I wanted to run Audi clocks, I was stuck with the TT. It's not for me. I wanted Renault clocks in my Renault car. So I wired the Clio wiring loom to the 20 valve BAM engine. Yes, that's possible. It's tricky. A lot of time went in. A lot of grey hairs appeared. And my skid aged. But it worked. So, here we go. So how do you make this happen? Well, first and foremost, if you want everything to work on this car like it did, traction control, ABS, all the clocks, so your fuel, speedo, revs, and cruise control, that all worked on this car. And that won't work on any other way. And what you want to do is keep the Clio happy, and you want to use as many sensors as you physically can on the Audi engine. There's a little trick which took a while to figure out, but the crank trigger is 36 minus 1, or 36 minus 2, or 60 minus. Either way, I can't remember off the top of my head. It's been a minute. But the crank trigger shares the same on the Audi engine as the Clio. So that's one factor. So there's no custom trigger wheels or anything that's got to go in and being programmed. We thought we'd try that first and then swap a few sensors over. Next thing, they've got fly-by-wire throttle. So we used the Clio throttle body. So here is an adapted BAM inlet manifold. As you can see, this is the Renault Clio throttle body. It looks almost identical to the Audi throttle body that come off this original inlet manifold, but being that this is a naturally aspirated car, the throttle body is slightly bigger. This looks the same. I think they're Bosch. It says made in Germany on it, even though it's Renault. So they're not far off, and I did try and use the throttle body, but it started revving. And like when I was revving, it was doing all sorts of weirdness. So we used the Renault Clio throttle body. So what I had to do was, I cut the end of the Clio inlet manifold off, and then welded it, and then pulled and polished it into the BAM inlet manifold. And say, it doesn't matter which way, whether you use a BAM inlet manifold or an AGU inlet manifold or whatever engine you're using, whether it's this way or that way, it's nigh on any different. But that's the way we did it. There was no drilling and tapping. As you can see, it's all nice and flush. You can't really tell. Another thing, that is a Clio intake temperature sensor. This is a cheat code for you guys. I get messages. I haven't owned this car for probably a year or so now. I still get messages how I've done the build, how I do the drive shafts and everything. So the aim of this video is to tell you exactly what the crack is. That is the Clio map sensor. There's other ports and stuff on here. I welded them up. So yeah, that is how to go about an inlet manifold. I can understand that a lot of you are not fabricators, but there's plenty of people around, or you can message me and I can knock one of these up for you if you want to go down that route. And it's no trouble. I need an inlet manifold, and I need the Clio inlet manifold and throttle body. So yeah, that's a biggie. Next up, keep the car happy. Clio coil pack. Obviously, the Audi engines use coil on plug. I'm not a fan. It's extra wiring and it didn't really work for what I started out to do. So, and that's to keep the Clio ECU happy. I mean, a standalone ECU, you can run your coil on plug. That's no problem. We want to try and get the basics done to get this car running with the Clio ECU, because the way I went about this was turnkey with no additional ECU to start with, but we'll come to that shortly. This is the Clio coil pack. So it was plug and play with the Clio loom. Easy work. It's made a little bracket for the bottom, little flat piece, bolted it down to it, then bolted it to the cam cover. Easy work. Little change of scenery. The side of the Audi block, there is a little housing with the water temperature sensor. Now, you want to go on eBay and buy, voila, the aluminium kit. What I done was, I welded this up, drilled, tapped, and that is the Clio water temperature sensor. I mean, this little aluminium kit comes with this little sort of Y piece here in aluminium and the thermostat housing. So yeah, it's vital to keep Signor or Monsieur French Clio happy. Winning. Right. Drive shafts. These are the things that I get asked about most. How do you do drive shafts? Where'd you get them done? I made them. Apart from these sleeves, which I had machined at a local engineering firm. Well, I say local, they were in Shrewsbury, and it was Bill Carr Engineering. The Clio side is about 32mm diameter, and the Audi side are 25mm. So this is about 110mm, if I remember. Let's get a tape. Let's try and back myself up a bit. Bit awkward. Yeah. About 110mm. So halfway in between, it was machined out to the 32mm, then the 25 the other side into the middle. Then these were drilled. There's a weld prep done on either side of the drive shaft, and then they was welded up like multi layers, and then they were plug welded. So these were drilled in multiple places through the shafts and then welded up, and they've been good for a good 300 horsepower for a while. So I mean, there's other companies. I mean, you could knock up a set of these and like tack the ends. I mean, these have been balanced as well. I had these balanced. You can go to somewhere like Satchel Engineering or Beresford or whatever, but all you need to do is mock up something like this. I mean, this car is a non-cup. So, forgive me a minute. Sort of gives you an idea. This is super awkward, trying to film and use a tape measure at the same time. So in the middle of that it's about 240 millimeter to there, then about 170 millimeters from there to there, if that gives you an idea. Or from the cup, the passenger side, I believe it's the passenger side, 330 millimeter, the end of the shaft. Got to take the bolt off the end. No, still more. From centre. Easier way. This is difficult. It's around 470 to the end of the shaft. And then the smaller shaft is around 220 millimeters from the cup to the middle. Take the end of this off. Hub nut. It's about 290 millimeter from the end to the middle. So there you have it. Next up, radiator. Now this is a fully bastardized Honda Civic EG EK radiator. I'll cut the top off. Then made only top section for height, because you have a lot of constraints in the engine bay with one of these engines. So yeah, that was important. So you're going to have to get one of these made up, or figure out how to get a custom radiator done. That is the Clio's radiator speed controller. And that is a spowl fan. So put 2 spades on there. Go to the engine bay. Go through the wire in a minute. Shouldn't take me too long to figure out. There we go. 2 spades. That is for the radiator. And you've got a red and a pink wire. And they go to the blue and the black on the spowl fan. I mean, you don't have to use a spowl fan, but I recommend them because they're probably the best aftermarket ones out there. So yeah. I mean, it is important to get them the right way around, because it'll determine what ways the fan's spinning, whether it sucks or blows. So once it's running, get her up to temperature, find out whether it's blowing towards the engine bay or sucking in. Then you've got the alternator. This is the Audi alternator, and it's 1 wire. And on the Clio loom, that is a greenish, whitish wire. And then on the Audi, it's blue. So cut as much of the Audi loom as possible of the plugs you need when you get rid of the one side. And this keeps the Clio happy. So that's pretty easy to figure out. I'll figure out what that is shortly. As I said, it's been a while. But that'll be an Audi plug. And that is the Clio loom. And that's also 1 wire. These are the power cables for the alternator and the starter motor. They're easy to wire in. I think that is air intake temperature sensor by the look of the plug, because that shares the same plug as the injectors. One wire starter motor. It's a red wire on the Audi. I don't know what colour it is in here, but it's a white, I think. But look at the thickness. So yeah, simple to do. One wire, plug straight in. Winning. This is the all-important crank sensor. See, you've got 1, 2, and 3. You've got a black, a brown, and a white wire. You get rid of the black from number 1. And on the Clio side, it is white and beige. So white's to white and the beige is to brown, from what I remember. So that's how to wire that up. So that'll help. Use, as I said, use as much of the Audi loom as you physically can with the plug on, because that is a biggie. I mean, without that, you ain't getting the car started, period. So yeah, that'll just plug in, plug and play. As I said, they share the same crank pattern, trigger pattern for your crank sensor. You don't use the Clio one anymore, you use the Audi one. And that is at the bottom of the engine, next to the gearbox behind. There she is. And it sits up on this little bracket here. No, it slots in, I can't remember how now. Just like that. There you go. Anywhere along there, it'll slot in. Knock sensors on the Audi engine and on the Clio loom. Don't need them. Don't use them. I don't need to use them anyway. But from what you have there and what I've showed you so far, if you plug everything in, your car should be pretty much turnkey and it'll start. I remember the first time my car started and it ran sweeter than the Clio engine that came out of it. I mean, obviously, the Clio's ECU is not programmed to run boost, but that is something we're going to come across later. Right, so into the engine bay. And once you get the engine in place, it's going to become apparent that the sump is going to foul on the subframe. So we have to adapt the subframe for space and clearance, because the engine does sit quite far over here. I mean, if this was a K20 swap, you'd be cutting away the chassis rail on the passenger side and then boxing it in for strength and then welding the gearbox mounting, whereas this is opposite. We can use pretty much the same markers or bolt positioning as the Clio for the Audi gearbox, if you do it properly and you follow along. I use some 6mm L section, L bracket, and it is about 80mm by 50mm and 250mm long. It is to the inside 60mm deep, 60mm. You have to cut that section out of the subframe and you have to weld this L-shaped section. Then you have to box it in using some more 6mm. That's what I used. I fully welded around the lower control arm bracket to make sure that was still had strength, because there's a tab and that's sort of spot welded on, but that's fully welded now around onto the subframe for strength. And once that's done, your engine can sit nicely into the engine bay. And then to get your sort of positioning, you want to get a jack underneath to prop it up, and some blocks of wood just to get it sitting where you're happy with. This car, the way I've aligned the mounts up, I can look through the wheel hub from one side straight through the gearbox and out the other side. So it's really dead level. You don't want the drive shafts protruding forward or back or up and down. You want to get it as level as possible. It's just better. It's less stress on anything. Right then, my friends. This is upper engine mount that I created. It's made of 6mm plate, steel, and I'm going to go as far as giving you the measurements and the materials I used and all that jazz to make your life a little bit easier. I had to figure this out. I never had no one showing me, but as I said, I like to be a cheat code for you guys to progress. This is a Polybush Land Rover rear trailing arm bush, and you can buy these off eBay, and they're fairly sturdy, and they're about 20 to 25 quid for a set of 2. You're going to need 3 because you're going to have the gearbox mount, upper engine mount, and you're also going to need a front stability mount, because you can't use a dog bone on this car, because you can, but it's just awkward. I used a front stability mount and it worked out much better. Stop the engine from rocking backwards and forwards. So what we got is these trailing arm bushes, and this is a piece of tube I had. It's almost like scaffolding tube. It was galvanized. It was horrible to weld. But the diameter of this is 40mm outside diameter, and it's probably 3mm thick. This plate is 100mm width by 170mm, there or thereabouts. It's 169 by 170mm length. The holes are 12mm. This section here is the same steel. I've cut that down, and what I've done was I used the same diameter hole saw to cut a piece, then I welded that in, if that makes sense. Probably doesn't. I can't explain myself very well. I'm not too good at teaching, but I'll try my best, so please be patient. So basically, what I've done was, I don't think I've got a pen here, I made a 47mm width rectangle, and it was 50mm, so it would have been 100mm by 47mm long rectangle. Bang dead center, I used a 40mm hole saw, industrial Sterrett type hole saw. And then I basically cut the circular section out of the middle, then tack that into place. This, again, 6mm on these sections. This isn't all one section, this is 3 sections of this top piece. So I cut 2 sections at 115mm long by 45mm as a rectangle. This was another piece of the L-shaped bracket that I used, and that is going to be 40 by 60, and that is also 6mm. This section here is 33 millimeters long by 80 millimeters long by 15 mil thick. You need to make this TP section because this section here goes to the Audi the 20 valve side casing engine mount, and we're just basically going to adapt it so it fits in the OEM Clio mounting position. But yours may vary by where you eventually get your engine sat in there, sat in the engine bay. So then this is a piece of 30 by 30 box section by 3 mil thick, and that is 95 millimeters long, this section here. This is another piece of 6 mil thick, and it's 120 millimeters long by 33 millimeters width. We've also a 12 millimeter hole for the mount. Then this section here, so if you go from this back edge, the center of this circle is 95 millimeters, and then it's to center from the top edge, it is 25 centimeters, 25 millimeters, sorry. I can't remember what bolt size this is, what M it is. It's probably like an M4, M16 maybe or something. But if you go to an engineering firm or somewhere that supplies bolts, we have a good one in Telford called Supply Right. You want to match that up with your center bushing. You want some nylock nuts. And this is 100 mil long, and it is only threaded on the end because you don't want to thread all the way through, because what it'll do with engine movement will start shredding the inner bush, and it'll start getting sloppy and you'll start getting vibration. This car the engine didn't really move a lot. It was nice and firm. So yeah, it's quite stiff to get in here. Try to push that in, but yeah, once that's lined up, that is the inside of the engine bay. That is your Clio mounting position, and that goes to your engine side casing mount. Right, so a little demonstration of how this sits on the mount. I don't know where the other one of them is. That's the bolts I used. They're like M12s or something. I have to keep looking through the boxes, the copious amounts of boxes. So yeah, that sits on this mount here. That sits on your Clio engine mount. And hey presto, that's your upper engine mount. So this is how it sits on the Clio base mount. So to originally start, you make a cardboard template, or out of some paper card, some thin card. Then basically cut out your 100 by 170 as a rectangle. Then mark out your holes, put a center punch through where the holes line up. And then that'll give you a base plate where to drill on your actual metal plate. But as you can see, there's not a lot of room between the base mount of the engine and the Clio mount. It is rather tight in here. A lot of people say like the 20 valves are heavy, but we weighed it and it weighed about, I think it was about 10 kilo more, so it probably weigh about the same as just a normal F4R that's been turboed. Right, so what we have here on the table is the gearbox mount I made. And again, Land Rover trailing arm bush. These rounded sections at the bottom, propping it up. The same as the top engine mount. Same principle for the top engine mount. Excuse, that's a Mac valve from when I was for the boost control. But again, that's not important at the minute. Tape measure. This is the 60 by 40 6mm thick L-shaped bracket. This bolts to the gearbox. This section here bolts to the chassis rail where the gearbox mount on the Clio bolted to underneath the battery tray. So what we did was drilled out the holes that were holding the battery tray mount in. So they're original OEM positions, but we drilled all the way through the chassis rail, put some big penny washers in the way to basically strengthen it up, stop it from flapping about. And that's what it looks like side profile. The gearbox is at a slight angle. I mean, this will be pretty much horizontal, but this chassis rail comes in at an angle. So as before, same measurements as the top engine mount. I mean, I know this is not ideal. I would have loved to have filmed this car when I started, but that would have been a few year process because I didn't throw this car together in a week. I mean, I had it for 3 years. Yeah. So it took its sweet time. Hopefully this will save you time. So I'm going to do my best and show you how I went about building everything. And that's up to you whether you build one yourself or you could ask me if you want me to build you one. But I'll only ever do things properly. And this mount at the top is 115 millimeters long across here by 47mm wide. This section, as it's got a slight bow because it goes down at an angle, it's probably 2 or 3 degrees. And that's 200mm long by 50mm wide. The height of this is 50mm to the plate. So that's 50 by 120, does it say? 115. And basically, the way to do this is to get the engine sat where you want, try and knock something like this up and see where it sits and if it works for you, and then tack it in position. And then if you're happy with it, fully weld it. These parts are important. They will hold the majority of the engine in place, engine and gearbox side. And with these trailing arm bushes, it won't have any movement, so it won't be flapping around in there. So then you can go on to making your front stability mount. But before we get there, this is 60mm long. These are 6mm thick. That's just a plate on the top just to hold everything nice and square. So yeah, that's the gearbox mount. Winning. Next, what we have here is the front stability mount. I opted for this over a dog bone because the dog bone would have been really, really far to where it needs to mount up to. And this is quite close to the engine. I mean, that sits on the front subframe. There's 2 L-shaped brackets. Same again. This is 60mm wide. You just measure basically inside that, which is 60mm. That'll come as it is and just work to what you've got. This bolts to the bottom of the gearbox. This goes round the starter motor, so it's slightly curved. So that's something that you'll probably come across. So this is another L-shaped bracket, which is 60 by 30. 60 by 45, sorry. By 120 mil long, by 40 mil wide. And as I say, this bolts through the gearbox, that bolts through the gearbox, and this mounts to the bottom subframe on the front of the engine bay. Winning. Right, shifters. This is an A3 20 valve turbo shifter. They're on cables, unlike the Clio. That's the old ones. We've just swapped those over. OEM. We can obviously talk about both because there's a Cooler Works Pro Race shifter there. So I've got opinions on both. And if you just want to get the job done and you don't care how your car drives, go with OEM. If you're trying to be if you're on a budget. But I will tell you that they sit very low, and they're quite a reach down to change gear, and I didn't like that at all. So what I opted for was the Cooler Works Pro Race. I mean, this made a world of difference. It's got God knows how much adjustability. It's got a really long shifter shaft, so brings it up by the steering wheel, so comfort when you've got harnesses on or whatever. It was a really nice drive with this. This was supplied by our friends over at WMD Evo. Fraser over there hooked us up with this. Got us a really good price on it at the time. I mean, I didn't buy this just to be a posh twat. I bought it because it's a great bit of kit. I mean, if that worked and I could live with that, I would have, but you'll find that you'll probably hate the original one. So save up a little bit and just go out and get a Cooler Works Pro Race shifter. I mean, these fit the O2J, O2M, so the 5 and 6 speed. I'm going to talk about the 5 speeds because that's what route I went down. So I know this works on a 5 speed. And it's the same part number as a 6-speed. And that's how you reverse. On here, it's a push down. They look bloody hideous. And as I said, it was like reaching all the way down to try and get to it, and it didn't really work for us. So this was what we opted for. Pretty simple to fit. On the Clio, there's two holes. They pretty much line up perfectly where these will go, but I just had to make the hole a little bit bigger, so we drilled them out. We didn't use this back section to mount it, but what we did do is we can find the base plate. There's a base plate cover, and there's an M8 captive bolt which comes through the bottom of the car. I mean, that's the outside of it. I literally just welded a plate on there and just bolted it through there and then bolted the two there, and it was nice and solid. And that's what worked for us. I mean, go this way straight off the bat if I was you, and you'll thank me later. Right then, next up, the all-important pedal assembly. This is the Clio OEM pedal assembly, which has been adapted to be hydraulic. That's the Clio drive-by-wire throttle, so don't have to worry about that. That's all its original position. When I first started out, I overcomplicated everything, moving the pedal assembly over and all that jazz. But we basically adapted the cable clutch to run a Polo 9N master cylinder. And the reason why we didn't use a Clio one is because this is a VR6 slave cylinder, It's an upgraded one. It's supposed to be plastic, but the VR6 ones are aluminium. So we had a custom clutch line made up at a company in Telford, Friction Hydraulics. Good man Rob in there sorts all our hydraulic lines when we do turbo conversions and stuff. He does all the turbo lines and turbo oil feeds and all that stuff. So shout out to him, good man. But there's a few companies that out there which will knock you a clutch assembly up, a clutch line up. But yeah, that's what we wanted. The same throw. We wanted it to feel natural. And the Clio one's all plastic with plastic pipes and stuff, and I didn't want to go down that route. I wanted durability because I wanted the car to be trackable and take the abuse. So this is what we opted. We drilled a hole here so it goes out into the engine bay. So that goes through. This is a little reservoir off, I think it's the Audi reservoir, I can't remember off the top of my head. It could be Audi, it hasn't got Audi written on it. Yeah, possibly Audi, I don't know. But yeah, that's how we went about that. So we cut all the bracketry off, took the pedal off. We drilled that and it's got a really nice natural throw to it, so we had a really nice pedal feel. So that's how we went about that. I mean, it'd be nice to show you how we went about it, but this was a trial and error and we went through a fair bit of fettling, cutting and stuff, so yeah, it weren't ideal. So basically we'll just show you the finished one. So yeah, there's a lot to digest, isn't there? So why even go through all this rigmarole of putting a 20 valve Audi engine in a Clio? Well, first of all, the engines are relatively cheap. They're far cheaper than the F4Rs are now. F4R engines are quite expensive now. By the time I was building this car, they wasn't really worth anything. You could pick up a breaker for 800 quid with a good engine and gearbox in, and you could just go down the route of turbocharging that. But 230 horsepower for how much it costs to do the conversion doesn't really bear thinking about. It would cost you 3 or 4 grand to turbocharge the Clio engine for 230 horsepower, and you'll soon get bored of that. High boost. So a lot of people for high boost, they'll put a thicker head gasket out of Megane in there and some rod bolts, and they'll do 280 horsepower. But then again, that's pretty much its limit. And then we all know how expensive it is to go and forge a Clio engine, the F4R. It's a lot of money. You're going down a different route, because then the weak point is a gearbox. The gearbox is a dog shit, like literally. I mean, they die standard. All gearboxes, there's the circlips like fall out of them, or they lose gears, and they're just a crap gearbox. Whereas the Audi gearboxes are solid, bomb-proof, literally bomb-proof, take loads of power. And so does the stock 20 valve engine. I mean, 280 horsepower, unopened, is easy work. It's more than enough. That's a high boost Clio with like a KO3S or a KO4 conversion, turbo conversion. Set of rods, took a set of rods in the 20 valve engine and you're well over 300 horsepower, reliably. Rods are 300 quid. Easy work. So there you have it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed what you've seen. Hope it's given you some insight into what's involved, the custom parts that's involved, and a general consensus of whether it's worth doing or not. But that's up to you. I know what I'd do. It'd be this all day long. K20 conversions, mega expensive. 20 volt turbo engines, not very expensive. But they're very rewarding and a lot of fun. And they're a lot of fun to build. I mean, you don't have to go down the custom route of building everything custom. I mean, if you're happy with Audi clocks, it's a lot more straightforward than the way we went about building this car. So, next up on the next episode, we'll be starting to bolt parts on the engine and start buttoning stuff up and start putting the car back together. So, we've loved having you and we'll see you on the next one. Peace out.